Hello YouTube! This time on Eric's Projects, I'm going to be back here working on Super Crunchy. How many times has this happened to you? All that cranking, and it doesn't matter how many times I do it, when this thing is cold, anything below 60 degrees, 50 degrees, it is not starting. Just rolls the white fuel smoke out of the tailpipe, puts a lot of excess wear on my starter, my engine. I got to cycle the glow plugs numerous times. You may have seen it in videos past, but I've tried lots of things. I put in all brand new Ford Motorcraft glow plugs. I put in the White Rogers super heavy duty relay. I changed out the valve cover gaskets with the under valve cover wiring harness. Nothing has changed how this truck starts in the cold. And I was down to, well, I just got to spend the money and put injectors in it. It's got 243,000 miles on it. They've served a good life. But in some more reading through forums and coming across things, I came across, hopefully, a fix, a cure-all. So if any of you are having this issue, maybe this will work for you. Because the only problem I have with my truck is it doesn't start when it's cold. If it's plugged in, it starts up great. In the summertime, it starts up great, unless I'm at high altitude for some reason. And if anybody has any input on that, that would be greatly appreciated. Above about 5,000, 6,000 feet, this thing will not start. Like I said, as long as it's plugged in, no problems whatsoever. Doesn't run rough, doesn't idle rough when it starts up, doesn't blow a bunch of smoke when it's running, or even when it's cold startup, when it's been plugged in, nothing. As long as it's plugged in, it works great. And I'm under the impression that that's the oil flow through the injectors, and it's just not flowing good enough, so when it's plugged in, that oil is nice and warm and it flows better. I do run a Shell Rotella T6 540 full synthetic oil in this truck. I switched over to the full synthetic in the hopes that one, prolonged oil change intervals, and I just sent in my oil sample from this oil to do a comparison between conventional oil and synthetic oil of different brands. And so I switched over to the synthetic, trying to make it start easier, and that didn't help at all either. But what I found, or what I've read, is on the injectors, underneath the electronic solenoid, is an armature plate. Now that armature plate needs 0.04 of an inch clearance underneath it. As the injector wears, that clearance gets smaller. If that clearance even drops by 1,000th or 2,000ths of an inch, it will affect the starting of the truck, especially cold starting, because the oil just doesn't flow. So what I've got here is a shim kit to shim that armature plate back to the factory position of 0.04 of an inch, and I'm gonna hope this is my cure-all, and my truck will run like new, start like new, won't have to plug it in when it's 50 degrees and below, and I'll be a happy camper. But you know what, if it doesn't, I gotta buy injectors anyway, and I'm only out 75 bucks what I paid for the kit. Now this kit I got from eBay, Robert Saunders out of Bothell, Washington. And let me show you what he includes in his kit for $75. I believe he has two kits. One is about $50 and it does not include the tools, and the other one is $75 and it does include the special tools. Let's take a look at the kit and what's in it. All right, I'm inside now out of the sun so I can see a little better, and maybe you can see a little better too. Open this up. all out of there. So what we have, okay, we have a 94 to 2003 7.3 liter Powerstroke injector tune-up shim kit with special tools. $75, free shipping, comes out of Washington. And let's open this up here. Let's see, number 1 injector tune-up kit will do 8 to 10 injectors with screws, shims, and tools to install. Let's see, let's give me a platform here. Hey, you've got instructions. Nothing left in there. Okay. We have some 3,000 shims, some 1,000 shims. I'm going to guess there's probably a 2,000 shim in there too. We have a T20 Torx bit. Oh, if I got a stripped out solenoid screw. Let's see. Got some 2000s. Oh, this is a feeler gauge. So it comes with the feeler gauge. Open that up real quick. All right, this is what was in the bag here. It looks like there's a part number. These must be for the screws for the solenoid. Part number DP-S0010. New screws and a 2000s and a 4000s feeler gauge. I've got another set of feeler gauges in the toolbox too, in case not too happy with those or whatever, but they should work just fine. We have some tools. The special tool, like an inverted Torx there. Another Torx. And another Torx. And another inverted Torx. Let's see if these Torx have a number on them. T10. Oh, what the heck? Where's the number on this one? Maybe this is one of them weird special ones. 15 IP. And these two here both say, those inverted, both say 4.5. Looks like pretty good instructions, color pictures, multiple steps, explaining the steps, not just unscrew a screw and do this and that. Both sides here. Okay, well, this is the whole kit for $75. The instructions, the 4 tools, the 2 feeler gauges, the pack of screws, a tool to remove strip screws, and the shim pack. I bet these are, since there's 4 packages in there, I bet it's a 1,000, 2, 3, and 4,000 shim packs. And those will go underneath the armature plate. So let's pop the hood and get going on this. And the great thing about this is you do not have to pull the injectors. You can do it all right in the truck, so you don't have to worry about the oil getting in the cylinder, cranking the engine over by hand to push the oil out, or either putting the valve covers, setting them back on, and turn it over with the key when all the injectors are out and the glow plugs are out. So this is an easy, easy job to do. Yeah, right. But not so much easy, but a whole lot less involved than changing injectors and pulling your glow plugs and then putting it all back together. Let's move forward and see if this makes this thing start. Oh, I'm going to get the current temperature outside right now. All right, it's currently, right about 50 degrees. This thing is still slowly falling. It's just hanging in the air. But yeah, 50 degrees, and you saw this. It doesn't start. It's not happening. Just puts the white fuel smoke out the tailpipe. So this fix, it's gonna fix it. I got high hopes it's gonna fix it. All right, the first thing to do, anytime you need to access these valve covers or glow plugs or whatever, is go ahead and pull the battery. I like to unhook both batteries, that way there's no chance of shorting anything out. I'm gonna have to pull the air filter and the air intake tube. I'm gonna have to pull the intercooler tube, just pulling it off up here, and then as well as down here, and I believe it's a 7/16 nut on both of those. Pulling, so just getting all that out of the way, and I'll go ahead and get this box out of the way, and that'll free up this side of the valve cover. There's a bracket here. This will have to come off. It's got like part of your wiring harness plugged into it down there. That'll be easily accessible with a 10mm ratchet or socket once we get down there. And it'll be the same thing on the other side. Now, this side looks a whole lot more difficult to get everything out, but I assure you it's not that bad. You still have the nut down here for the intercooler tube, as well as up here, the engine oil dipstick that will come undone from down here. Heater hoses are no problem laying out of the way, battery out of the way, and the tube comes out. The hardest part about this is getting the valve cover off. Well, we'll get to it a little later, but down here also, the lower bolts on the valve cover, once those come out, it's just kind of a little bit of pain fishing the valve cover out, but it's not terrible. So I'm going to get started on this. I'll get started on the driver's side because that's always the easiest. So start with the easiest first, right? And go from there. You can see in here now that the intercooler tube is off, battery and battery box is out, air filter line is off. This is that bracket. There's two bolts here, 8mm head bolts, and there's a 10mm head bolt here, and that'll take off this wiring harness connector, and then we'll be able to take the two bolts off of here also and get this out of the way, so we can get the bracket off and set out of the way and go ahead and get this valve cover off. Ready to pull the bracket off, the wiring harness is off, the rest of the air intake tube is off. And speaking of air intake tube, I had a leak in my air line there for a while, my intake, and notice how chewed up the edges of that wheel are. Yeah, that'll get replaced pretty soon too. But now it's a 13mm socket to take all the bolts off the valve cover. There's a couple back here that are a real pain in the butt to get to, but it can be done. Just takes a little patience. And need new O-rings on that, but I ain't doing that now. Anyway, so we're down to the valve cover already. Pull all these bolts and nuts off. I'm going to lay this bracket back off to the side so it's out of the way. This valve cover is going to lift right off, exposing the injectors and the oil plugs and all that, and right where we need to start working. I think the easiest tool I've come across so far for getting these bolts on the back of the valve cover is just a 1/4" ratchet with a deep, like 1/2 inch 13mm socket. And at least that way you can get on it and you can get a little bit of a turn out of it. I'm sure a universal joint on a little extension would work also, but I usually end up falling off more with those than I do just doing it this way. Whatever works for you. All the bolts are out of the valve cover, so now the driver's side's nice and easy, lifts right off. And the injectors and the glow plugs and everything's exposed. These are your glow plugs down here where the white wire goes. You can kind of see it right there. And these are the solenoids that got to come off, and the armature plate is underneath, and that's where we'll check for that clearance. This is, I think these are the special Torx bolts here, where they're a different size, and they call them a Torx Plus or a German Torque or something. So the screws for the solenoid, this is that Torx 1P or 1IP, whatever it is. And that's the one that goes right in there, nice and tight. First solenoid, I got all the screws loose, ready to come out, and got the plug off. So this is going to lift off. Oh, that's probably supposed to be that way. But this is where that armature touches. This is the armature plate that we got to check the clearance underneath of. So I'll take those feeler gauges and go around it. Let's get this spacer off of there. That goes with the solenoid. Yep, so this is where I'll check the clearance to check for that 4/1000 clearance. So as far as the instructions go, we'll remove the valve covers, get to the solenoids, remove the solenoids using the IP15 Torx tool. I know my glow plugs are good because I've replaced them and the wiring harness and the solenoid. So we're going to check armature clearance with a feeler gauge in all four corners and write it down. Is to check the armature clearance before removing the bolt. And if it's less than 2/1000, I need to add the 1 and 2/1000 armature shim and the 2 and 3/1000 solenoid spacer shim. Over 2/1000, add 1 2/1000 armature shim and a 3/1000 solenoid shim. Well, as you can see on this one, that 2/1000 goes through real easy. So I'm certainly the 2/1000, but the 4/1000 doesn't go in. Not at all. So I'm going to say I am over the 2/1000. So I'm going to add 1 2/1000 shim to the armature and 1 3/1000 to the solenoid. Now on this first one, I've got the 2/1000 shim in there. Now I can get that 4/1000 feeler gauge in there, and it says you want a tight to loose 4/1000. That's exactly what that is. So I am happy with that. Now I need to put the solenoid spacer shims on there also. Something to take note of is when you put these shims on, they'll go between the solenoid and the spacer. And that's just the location, but it also helps keep them on, because if you flip this over, they fall right off, as I found out. Awesome. Solenoid's back on, plugged back in. That one is done. Now it's time to move on to the next one and do the same thing. First one takes a little while as I'm learning, but as it should go a little faster now. When I got back to this third injector back here, I got the 4/1000 shim, and it's fitting in there. So this one's good. I don't have to do anything with that one, so time to put the solenoid back on and move to the next one. These first two I had to shim them up just the same. The 2/1000 under the armature plate and the 3/1000 under the solenoid. Shimmed up and put back together. Injectors are plugged back in. Everything's tightened back down. Now it's just to put the valve cover back on, put this side back together, move on to the passenger side, and do the same thing and be confident that my cold start issues are gone. Passenger side valve cover's off. Kind of a little bear getting it off, but it comes off all right. you know, nothing has to come off around it. Like I said, just that dipstick nut, and I went ahead and loosened up the coolant reservoir to get the intercooler pipe off. But same process on this side. Pop the solenoids off, gonna do some measurements on the armature and shim if needed and put it back together. Finally all back together. Passenger side went back together, and the whole job went a lot quicker than the driver's side did. Passenger side took about 2 Daniel Tiger episodes, and driver's side took a little more. And yeah, I said Daniel Tiger episodes. That's how I judge some of my work sometimes, is how many Daniel Tigers my little 4-year-old girl gets to watch. And I try to keep it about 2. Fortunately, she was with Mom earlier today, so she's not totally neglected. But anyway, the truck has not been plugged in at all today. I mean, I had the cord up here for plugging in my phone, but not plugged in, hasn't been started. This morning it was 50 degrees, it's currently 61.6. It's come up a little bit, but 60 degrees is kind of the real hit and miss. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but usually it doesn't point. So I'm gonna hit the key on this thing and see if it fires up. Took that many times because of doing the shims. I don't know. The real test will be in the morning. I'm going to come out here about 6 o'clock in the morning and try it and see if it starts up. I got about a 200-mile drive tomorrow. It doesn't start at 6, so I'll plug it in and it should start at 8. Stay tuned. Well, I just took this for a short drive. And man, it kind of feels like it's got a miss. Then I got to check engine light. So I'm going to pull that driver's side valve cover. I'm not 100% confident I plugged all the injectors back in. Maybe I pulled the loops. I don't know how easy it'll be to tell doing this, but check engine lights on. Let's see if you can hear the truck, how rough it's running. It is literally shaking right now, and yeah, it's actually shaking, and it never. I mean, it ran completely fine before I did this, and now I am 10 times worse off than what it was. Well, I'm back home and just pretty much bummed. The thing's hard to start, 60 degrees, you saw it didn't start. Now it's throwing a check engine light, which first time in 3 years is throwing a check engine light. I drove it down to O'Reilly's, they put a little scan on it showing no codes, nothing, 0 of 0 codes. They said, well, their code reader doesn't work too often, so go to check at AutoZone. So I went up to AutoZone. They tried 2 different readers, 3 different times in each readers, 0 codes, everything looks good. Even though you can clearly see the service engine light is on. There it is, service engine soon. But yet, no codes. No codes whatsoever. So, I'm gonna inspect my work one more time, make sure I didn't forget to hook something back up. Forget to hook an injector wire up or something stupid like that. So anyway, I fully knew this might not work, but I didn't expect everything to be worse. I mean, the truck shakes when it runs, hard starting even when it's warmed up. It feels like it's missing. I didn't expect it to run worse than what it did before, even because it ran perfectly fine before, just doesn't start when it's cold. Now it doesn't start when it's cold and it runs bad. So I don't know, like I said, I'm gonna go over my work one more time and just make sure everything's right. I realize every truck's not gonna be the same. It just sucks when it's yours is the one that fails and is not the same. To be continued. I have a renewed hope, YouTube. Dork. Turns out when you leave number 8 injector unplugged under the valve cover, it runs like crap and throws a code and is hard to start. So pulled the valve cover on the passenger side, found that unplugged, plugged it back in, smoothed right out, starts up a whole lot better, even warm. So tonight, I am going to go ahead and leave it unplugged. No cord. No plug-in. We're going to see what happens in the morning. Come out here about 6 o'clock in the morning and see if that shim kit helped out, shimming everything back to stock. I have a renewed sense of hope that this is going to work. And if it doesn't, you know what? The stock one's got 243,000 miles on him anyway. They've served a good life, and they'll get replaced with great ones that will serve my purpose even better than these will. See you in the morning. It is now the following morning, a little after 6 a.m. The temperature is reading 34 and slowly falling, but cold enough to do a test. We are 33.7, so 33.6, slowly falling, but cold enough. So let's truck's unlocked. You can see it's not plugged in. Didn't get plugged in. So here it is. Moment of truth. Feel like it's let's make a deal or something. Are you gonna bet $1,000 that this thing will start? Because that's essentially what I'm doing. No more check engine light. Glow plug lights off. Let's try to cycle it a couple times. See what happens. Hey, that might have done it. Oh, I'm so excited. I'll know for sure tomorrow too if it does it again. Oh man. I'm happy. Amazing how you can go from loss of hope to like, woohoo! Over a single stupid screw up. I'll check this thing again tomorrow, but if it doesn't make it on the video, I'll comment below if it does or doesn't start. But oh man, fixing a cold start issue on a 7.3 for under $100, that is a pretty good thing going. Oh, I'm excited. So maybe this will help you out. Shim yours up, start your truck up in the cold. This thing never, ever would have started at 36 degrees before. I mean, I would have been on here for over an hour. And eventually wearing out the starter, probably would have just plugged it in and went back inside the house, which is what the plan was this morning. That's why I'm up at 6. I got to leave it by 8:30. So, awesome. If this works for you, great. If it doesn't, hey, at least you tried something like I did. So, get out there and learn stuff on your trucks and enjoy them. God bless you.